Hello and welcome to the phase 1 of the entry-level driver training trainer certification course. The purpose of this module is to identify areas to focus on for new trainers, describe what the trainer certification process is going to look like, and set expectations for how trainers interact with trainees, other drivers, and members of management going forward. I'm going to share my screen now. Apple Bus Company has partnered with the School Bus Safety Company to deliver an online, completely virtual learning management system. This way, all of our training can be standardized and accessed from anywhere. This not only represents a platform for training, but has some key components that also make up important aspects of our safety culture. This safety management system poster is available in pocket size, full paper size, as well as poster size, and really does form the foundation for what we're going to be doing going forward. As a trainer, you will set the tone for safety and the safety of students at your location. The responsibility is awesome. I want to commend you on taking on this vital role. The ability for us to transport students safely. I can't think of a position outside of maintenance that dramatically impacts the safe operation of vehicles and drivers' ability to get students to and from school safely. So I commend you on this. It's going to be a lot of information. Some of it you may already know. Some of it is going to be new. It's going to seem like a lot at first, but just take it one module at a time. Phase 1 is primarily education. It is learning different modules. We all know the traditional steps to becoming a commercial driver and a school bus driver. It's heavily focused on the pre-trip. This entry-level driver training rule is in place in large part because the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration instituted some minimum standards that all 50 states and associated provinces have to follow to license commercial drivers, and the S endorsement is a major factor in that. So they've broken it down to 3 separate phases. You have theory or classroom, range, and road. And there are certain elements that have to be taught in each of those categories. What we're going to do is go through, and you're going to have a multitude of modules to complete within School Bus Safety Company as a part of Apple Bus Company's phase 1. And that constitutes much of the theory portion of the entry-level driver training. We're also going to have some education modules on how to teach adult learners, how no 2 trainees are the same, and different methodologies to put tools in their tool belts. One of the things that to keep in mind, and you can talk to your trainees if they get frustrated or the task seems daunting, is driving a school bus is not an inherited skill set. It's not something that they were born with the knowledge to do. It's a learned skill set, and one that's got to constantly be nurtured. We always have to fight complacency and learn and grow and develop additional skills. And the more we see and the more challenges we come across as years go on driving a school bus, the more confident we become. So whenever drivers come in, or potential drivers, and they start to get frustrated, difficulty learning the pre-trip or operating a large commercial vehicle, make sure you tell them that. Reinforce to them that this is not something that's easy. What they're doing is very important. And generally when things are very important, they're not easy. So for us to start this, whenever we're having conversations with new drivers, this is safety management poster is going to be used in several different ways. First, it's going to be to set the expectation. So when a new driver candidate walks into a manager or a lead driver's office for an interview, it starts with an introduction. Hi, my name is Joe. You must be Susie. Thank you for coming in today. Before we get to the interview process, I'd like to take you over and show you this poster. If you can agree to eliminate these 22 unsafe behaviors on the right, things like following too closely, unprepared for what's coming, not being prepared for what's around you, dropping off students in unauthorized stops, and I'm going to leave you with a pocket version of this that you can review. But if you agree to eliminate these 22 unsafe behaviors and replace them with the 22 safe behaviors on the left, we'll proceed to the interview. Do you agree to work on these? It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be quick because some habits are ingrained. But if you agree to incorporate these 22 safe behaviors and eliminate these 22 unsafe behaviors, we'll go ahead and continue the interview. So that's one way we're going to use this. Another way is throughout the training process. Some locations are large, have a large training staff, or it may be specialized. You may have a classroom trainer. You may have a behind the wheel range trainer. You maybe have a behind the wheel road trainer. Other locations, it's one trainer that does everything. So we want to keep referring back to this throughout the training process. When we are doing commentary driving, triple LC defensive driving, we'll get into some explanations on those in later modules and in phase 2. We don't just tell them exactly what they're doing wrong, but we reiterate these 22 unsafe behaviors. So if we feel like they're driving too fast, we say number 19, driving too fast for conditions, and we consistently refer back to this. What that's going to do is it's going to maintain a culture. People are going to know what number 10 is, what number 22 is, in very short order. Within a year, this is going to become standard. All of our drivers are going to know this, and it's really going to take our training and our safety culture to the next level. Again, we've partnered with School Bus Safety Company. 22 unsafe behaviors form the foundation of our safety culture and our training platform. So now let's focus on the learning management system. This is the login page. It's very similar to almost any other website you're going to come across. You'll have a username and a password. Your username is typically your 4-digit Paycom ID, and your password will be issued to you by your location manager. Once you come into this dashboard, this is your training library. It's important to note, depending on what type of access level you've been given for your location, if you're an assignment manager, you may have this little hotel or skyscraper icon, which is the admin area. Once you go into that area, you come out of your training library and into your location's training platform. So we're going to go ahead and click on the admin area. As you get into this, you'll see there's 2 separate distinctive libraries right here. We have Vector Solutions and School Bus Safety Company. School Bus Safety Company is individualized courses, individualized modules, proprietary software that belongs to School Bus Safety Company. Vector Solutions is where I've taken that individual content and pulled it into a course so that you only have to issue one course instead of issuing 30 individual modules. So for today, we're going to watch the first module in the driver training course, along with the 22 safe best practices, which are reinforced in this module. This sets the tone for drivers going forward, lets them know what the expectation is. It's very clear. They articulate things in a way that most folks can understand. And it really does leave no room for guessing. So we'll go ahead and watch this module. I'll pause at certain times and we'll discuss some additional mechanisms that you can use at your location to reinforce some of the things that they're talking about. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this is a standardized training platform for all locations. There may be situations where you have to tailor the training to meet your specific district's needs. So just keep that in mind as we go through these, but it is some wonderful information.
As a school bus operator, you have a tremendous responsibility to safely transport children to and from school. In this course, Safety Best Practices, you'll be introduced to every aspect of safety and the actions you should take to keep safe. You'll learn all about accidents, what they are, the common types of accidents school bus drivers have, and finally, why people have accidents. We'll be giving you the information that will help you develop safe behaviors, and these behaviors will help you prevent accidents and injuries so that you can provide the safest school bus transportation possible. Let's examine the basics of safety by asking these 4 questions. What is safety? What are accidents? Why do accidents happen? And what is the 329:1 ratio? Next, we'll discuss how you can apply the answers to these questions to make you safer on the job. Now, before we get started, I'd like to tell you about 4 accidents that actually happened. A school bus is following a pickup truck only 2 seconds back. The driver of the pickup is on a cell phone, not paying attention, when he realizes the semi-tractor ahead is slowing down. He brakes hard, and the school bus rear-ends the pickup, squashing the pickup into the tractor. 2 people are killed. The driver of the pickup and a 16-year-old girl on the school bus. Now, what if? What if the school bus had been further back, say 4 seconds instead of 2? Or what if the bus driver had been looking ahead and had seen that the semi was slowing down and started to slow down themselves? Well, if these simple precautions were taken, 2 people would still be alive. In the second accident, the school bus is making a left-hand turn. The driver fails to check all of his blind spots, and he hits a pedestrian, killing her. The pedestrian had the walk now signal. Again, what if? What if the driver had rock and rolled in his seat to eliminate the blind spots? If he did, the pedestrian would probably still be alive. In this third accident, a 6-year-old boy was the last to exit his bus. He was clutching his artwork from that day, but as he stepped off, he dropped it, and the wind blew it in front of the bus. The crossing gate was just closing, and without thinking, he goes after the artwork, and he's killed by his own bus. If only the driver had counted the children to make sure they were all safely away. Or what if the driver had not rushed to pull away immediately after the kids had exited the bus? Then that child would still be alive. A school bus driver backs up the bus without using a spotter or getting out and looking. A car moves in right behind the bus, and the bus crushes its front end. Now, what if the driver had found a way to stop so they wouldn't have to back? What if the driver had used a spotter or had gotten out and looked? Well, then the driver would not have to radio dispatch and ask for help. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's too late to wish you could have acted differently after the accident has happened. The drivers who had these accidents have asked themselves over and over, why did I do that? I knew the safe action, but I didn't do it. If only I had one more chance. Operating a school bus involves many risks, but you must operate your bus the right way, the first time, every time. Only then will you avoid the consequences we just talked about. You know the old saying, hindsight is 20/20, and it's easy to wish you had acted differently. You wish you had stayed back 4 seconds. You wish you had counted the kids away. You wish you had rock and rolled. You wish you had used a spotter. But after the fact, it's too late. You don't get a second chance or a do-over when it comes to causing an accident. You have to live with the consequences. In this program, we'll show you how to do it right the first time, every time. If you do that, you'll never have to wish you had a second chance. So what is safety? We use the word all the time, and drivers kind of know what it means, but when they think about it, they realize they can't really explain it. What does it really mean? What's the definition of the word safety? Now, if you look up safety in the dictionary, what will it say it means? Take a few moments to think about this. What do you think safety is? Here are the most common answers we hear.
Having no accidents?
Acting in a caring way.
Doing all the things you're supposed to do in a way that shows?
Well, it seems we all care about safety, but very few people even know what the word means. Think about it. How can you have a passion for safety if you don't even know what safety is? Now, this is very important. If we care about safety, if we want to be safe, we need to know what the word means. Having no accidents is the consequences of being safe, the outcome of safety. It's not safety. The other definitions were just generalities. You know, if safety is such a gray area, so much so that we don't even know what it means, it kind of makes it impossible to put it into practice. You see, we understand that you really want to operate safely. However, when we dig deep into what this really means, very few drivers actually know how. So when you're told, have a safe day, what does that really mean? Well, here it is. Safety is defined as freedom from risk. It's that simple. If we're not at risk, then we're safe. This is so important, I think it bears repeating. Safety means freedom from risk. So what's the definition of risk? Think about it for a few minutes. What does the word risk mean? We take risks every day, and there are risky situations all around us. But what are they?
Taking chances.
Not acting safely.
Acting unsafely.
Okay, these all involve risk, but they're not the definition of the word. You see, risk is the possibility of bodily injury or damage to property. The possibility of bodily injury or damage to property. If we close our eyes and run across a busy street and we make it without having an accident, were we safe? Absolutely not. We took a huge risk, and there was a strong possibility of having an accident. We were very unsafe. Now, let's put these two definitions together. Safety is freedom from the possibility of bodily injury or damage to property. The important word here is possibility. If we're free from the possibility of bodily injury or damage to property, we are safe. So risk is the enemy, and we need to attack it and destroy it. But to do this, we need to go back to the source. Where does risk come from? Well, the source of risk traces back to you. Think about it. What creates risk? Where does risk come from?
This is a very important topic. This sets the tone for our entire safety culture and training program. It is getting new trainees, new driver candidates to understand, one, what safety is, and two, what risk is. For most adults operating a motor vehicle, whether commercial or their personal vehicle, is the riskiest endeavor they will undertake on a regular basis. Unless they're a closet adrenaline junkie who goes skydiving on the weekends or builds skyscrapers and works 150 stories up and decides to drive a school bus on their downtime. Sharing the road with other motorists at speeds sometimes greater than 70 miles per hour. They've gotten, as you'll see in additional parts of this video, extremely comfortable at driving within feet of other vehicles, but they've done it so many times that it becomes normal. They don't recognize the risks that are involved with driving. It's important that we get through to our trainees what safety is, what risk is, and really get them to buy into this as we go through these modules with them.
Now, I'll grant you, risk can come from natural sources like rock slides, rain, or ice on the road, but for the most part, where does risk really come from?
Speeding.
Following too closely.
Not rocking and rolling.
Yes, those are all correct, but the source of risk actually falls into just two categories: unsafe conditions and unsafe behaviors. By unsafe conditions, we're talking about the physical factors that can create risk. Now, these include brakes, tires, steering, suspension, and all the other physical factors that can create risk. We're also talking about processes that may not be in place to help reduce risk, such as employee drug tests, physicals, MVRs, and references. Now, in most cases, the physical risks created from unsafe conditions are engineered out of the vehicle. New technologies and systems make sure that only safe vehicles are put on the road. And the processes we mentioned earlier make sure that every driver has been reviewed and tested. Most operations do a great job at removing the risks from unsafe conditions. In fact, less than 1% of all accidents are caused by unsafe conditions. That means that 99% of accidents are caused by unsafe behaviors. That's right, almost every accident is caused by unsafe behaviors. Now, these are driving behaviors that involve risk, behaviors that are unsafe. Now, if only we knew which driving behaviors created risk, we could change them, remove the risk, and be safe. Well, great news. We do know the behaviors that create risk, and our goal is to explain these behaviors to you and motivate you to change them. So let's put it all together. If you want to be safe, first, you need to reduce or avoid risk. Second, you need to understand that almost all risk comes from your driving behaviors. And third, you need to remove the behaviors that involve risk, such as following too closely, rushing, backing, and not counting the kids away. Right now, you might be wondering, why would a professional driver develop behaviors that create risk? Well, there are two possible reasons. The first is ignorance. They simply don't know the behavior involves risk. And the second is they're a risk taker. Our goal is to overcome both of these reasons so that you never engage in behaviors where the risk can be avoided or reduced. Because as a professional who transports students, if you understand that behaviors totally under your control create risk, then why would you do them? No, honestly, why would you do them? Let's examine how this relates to your job as a school bus driver. First, let's look at some situations where you can remove the risk entirely. If you never have to back up your bus, then you're completely free from the risk of a backing accident. If you're free from risk, then you're safe from a backing accident. If you count the students as they exit your bus and count again once they're away from the bus, you're free from the risk of injuring one of them as you pull away from the bus stop. If you always perform a thorough and accurate pre-trip inspection, you're free from the risk of having a safety problem with your school bus. Of course, sometimes we can't avoid the risk entirely, but even in those situations, we can often reduce the risk. For example, if you always stay 4 seconds behind the vehicle in front of you, then you greatly reduce the chance of having a rear-end collision. If you have to back up, using a spotter reduces the risk of a backing accident. Another example is when you're making left turns where pedestrians could be crossing the street. If you always rock and roll back and forth in your seat, you eliminate the blind spots and reduce the risk of hitting a pedestrian. Less risk means you're safer. Okay, so now we know that safety means freedom from risk. And even if we can't eliminate the risk, we can often reduce it, and that makes us safer. Understanding this principle is vital to your role as a school bus driver. This is a lot of information, so it's worth a recap. Safety means freedom from risk. Risk is the possibility of bodily injury or damage to property. So, safety means freedom from the possibility of bodily injury or damage to property. Risk is the enemy. We need to remove or reduce risk whenever we can. Risk is created by unsafe conditions or unsafe behaviors. We've engineered away unsafe conditions so that less than 1% of accidents are caused by unsafe conditions, which means more than 99% of accidents are caused by unsafe behaviors. Most of the time, these are conscious and deliberate behaviors performed by the driver. The driver engages in these unsafe behaviors for two possible reasons. One, ignorance. They don't know they involve risk. And two, they are a risk taker. Our goal is to persuade all drivers to remove or reduce risk wherever possible. That is what safety is all about, removing or reducing risk. This is so important, we should say that again. Safety is about removing or reducing risk.
There are a couple items in that last video that I would like to reinforce. They touched on it about counting the kids off the bus and then counting them across the street as well. One of the requirements to be a entry-level driver trainer is you have to have 2 years have to have held a commercial driver's license with all applicable endorsements for at least 2 years. That said, if any of you have ever sub-driven on a route, one of the scariest things is when you have students that bail off the bus and then sprint across the street or go behind the bus, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just sit there and wait. As trainers, we have an opportunity. Every driver that comes through is going to see this video. We can reinforce so that unequivocally they know that the students are supposed to get off the bus, walk up 10 feet, look to the driver for the thumbs up. When the driver determines the way is clear, they give them the thumbs up to cross the road. Additionally, following distance. One of the things I want you to keep in mind as you go through the modules is take down notes. Keep a pad of paper next to you. Take down notes. You're watching the modules, you may be learning new information, but also think about ways you can incorporate that. Think about how you were trained and what this information you're receiving now and how you can use it to have better trained drivers than what you received when you first started. When it comes to following distance, there's a couple of things. One in particular that we can do, we always start a day on a bus, doing a pre-trip, teaching a pre-trip. Set that bus up 40 feet off the bumper of another bus so that every day the trainee gets up, gets in the driver's seat when they put on their seatbelt or to go about their training morning, and tell them every single day, see that vehicle in front of you? At no time should you be closer than these two vehicles are right now when you're driving down the road. Now at stop signs, stop lights, we teach them you should be able to see the tires of the rear tires of the vehicle in front of you touching the pavement. But when we're driving down the road, at no time should you be less than 40 feet from the vehicle in front of you. If we do that every day, 10 to 11, 12 days of training, they're gonna know when they get down the road what 40 feet or 4 seconds looks like. Typically we've gotten into we start saying things like maintain 4 seconds of following distance. We use the Smith system. We talk about the 5 keys, but we really rarely give them exactly what that looks like in a way that leaves no doubt. So if somebody's sitting in the driver's seat every day of training and you're telling them you should be no closer than this, they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and that's more likely to sink in. When it comes to the difference between somebody that's ignorant to unsafe or taking risk or a risk taker, there's one way to identify that. What I found is that we've all come across this, coming up to a stale green light. That light changes quickly. If you have a trainee that's behind the wheel, if their first reaction is to slam on the accelerator, they're probably a risk taker, and that needs to be addressed. If their first reaction is to let off the accelerator and cover the brake, that's not a risk taker. They've got some pretty good habits, and we want to build on those.
Now let's look at safety from the other direction. What happens when we're not safe, when we take risks? Sometimes it leads to an accident. So let's examine what accidents are. An accident can be small and involve only minor damage. However, sometimes accidents involve major property damage or severe injury. No matter what their size, no one wants to have an accident. But when an accident happens, it's because someone took a risk. Someone acted in an unsafe way. First and foremost, we care about the moral issues, how accidents affect our passengers, our fellow employees, and the communities we serve. We all have families and know that accidents can affect the whole family. Of course, no one wants to cause someone else harm. In fact, we want to do everything we can to prevent it. Caring is very good, but knowing what to do to prevent accidents is even more important. There's nothing good about having accidents. They cost a lot in terms of time, money, and emotional and physical pain. The good news is that accidents don't have to happen. They're preventable, and a big part of your job is to prevent them. Now, we've all had accidents of some kind, and there are many different types. For example, there are personal injuries like cutting your finger with a knife or stubbing your toe. There are property accidents like dropping something that breaks or putting diesel fuel in your car instead of gas. And finally, there are vehicular accidents. We all know about these. Each year in the U.S., there are around 11 million vehicle accidents. These result in 33,000 fatalities, 2.2 million injuries, and a cost of $50 billion. That's right, 33,000 fatalities each year, because drivers make mistakes that could easily be avoided. So, do you know the definition of an accident? Take a moment now to think about this and share your thoughts.
I'd say an accident is when someone gets injured.
An accident's a bad thing, but no one's at fault, really. I mean, that's why they call it an accident.
It's damage to a car or post or something.
Well, now that we have you thinking about accidents, we'd like to show you exactly what accidents are and how you can prevent them. Now, believe it or not, there are 4 things that define an accident. An accident is an unplanned event that disrupts activity, that involves or affects people, and that has a cause. First of all, accidents are unplanned. Nobody decides to have an accident. If accidents were intentional or planned, well, they wouldn't be accidents. They would just be bad behavior. The truth is, accidents happen because we're human, and humans make mistakes. And if you make a mistake that leads to an accident, it's almost always the result of an unsafe behavior, the result of taking unnecessary risks. Next, accidents disrupt our normal activities. They slow us down and decrease our productivity. They keep us from doing what we were doing before they happened. In other words, we have to stop what we're doing and correct the problems caused by the accident. And just think of the disruption that comes from just a minor vehicle accident. It'll probably involve the police to document everything and the EMS to make sure that no one's hurt. It's going to back up traffic and disrupt the lives of all the other motorists who are on the same road at that time. A dispatch will have to be notified, and someone will probably have to bring out another school bus. The children will be delayed. Their parents will be worried. Their classes may be disrupted. The whole school could be affected. Later, the maintenance shop will have to make repairs. And a claims representative will have to deal with managing the loss. Now, even if a serious injury doesn't happen, a minor vehicular accident is going to tie up the time and energy of a lot of people. So accidents disrupt normal activities. Next, accidents involve and affect people. Now, this means that when accidents occur, someone gets hurt, or someone's property is damaged, or because accidents disrupt normal activities, people are delayed and inconvenienced. So accidents involve people. Accidents also involve people because people cause accidents. It doesn't take a government study to prove that parked buses don't have accidents.
That's important to note and important to focus whenever you have trainees. Buses parked on the lot don't get in accidents. Buses out on the road have the potential to get in accidents due to deliberate, conscious decision-making on the part of our driver or other motorists.
People have accidents. In other words, accidents involve people because people cause them, and people cause them through unsafe behaviors. And that leads us to the 4th and most important point. All accidents are caused.
Wait a minute. What do you mean all accidents are caused? You're laying the blame for accidents on the drivers like it's always their fault? I thought the word accident meant no one's at fault. It was, well, an accident.
Well, sorry, but I have to disagree. As you continue through the course, it should become clear. But for now, let's go through the definition of an accident one more time. An accident is an unplanned event that disrupts activity, that involves or affects people, and that has a cause. Now, let's look at why accidents occur. It's plain and simple. Accidents are caused. They don't just happen. And in nearly every case, people are the root cause of accidents. People cause accidents when they take risks. In other words, accidents happen when people don't eliminate or minimize the risks around them. And this takes us back to the start of this program. Safety is freedom from risk. And if you engage in behaviors that involve risk, well, you will cause accidents. It isn't easy for us to admit that we actually cause accidents. We're afraid that we'll be blamed or reprimanded, and no one wants that. A good example is a teenager who has decided to always speed through yellow or even red lights as they change. He's not looking to have an accident, but there's little doubt that he will. It's only a question of time. There's also little doubt that when he does have an accident, his unsafe behavior will have caused it. Now, this example of an unsafe behavior is not that different from a bus driver who always follows too closely, or one that backs up as a regular practice, or doesn't count the kids away. Now, such unsafe behaviors will lead to accidents, and those drivers will have caused those accidents. Now, there's a very good reason to accept that people cause accidents. Can you think what that reason might be? Stop now and discuss why this idea is so important to our efforts to improve safety.
This is an important opportunity. The main theme to the first two modules of a driver training course is accountability. It's ultimately what we do as school bus drivers and as school bus driver trainers is such an awe-inspiring responsibility. We can impact the safe transportation of so many students and set the expectations for new drivers. But it first starts with understanding that what they do, the decisions they make, can be negative or positive. There are several modules through this course that reinforce that, but it's this fundamental principle that getting them to understand and accept will be critical throughout their training and then throughout their tenure as a school bus driver.
Now, it's important to accept that people cause accidents, because if accidents are caused, then they can be prevented. And the whole point of learning about accidents is learning ways we can stop them from happening in the first place.
So, of course, you understand that accidents are unplanned events. No driver means to have an accident.
But drivers do consciously and knowingly perform unsafe behaviors that lead to accidents.
For example, if a driver's only 2 seconds back from another vehicle and they have a rear-end collision, they caused that accident by only being 2 seconds back. Don't you agree?
Well, in that case, they should have been further back, yeah. But a lot of times, accidents just happen.
Actually, they don't. Can you give me a couple of examples of vehicle accidents where people were not at fault?
Sure. There's snow, ice, rain, fog. Need I go on?
No. None of those cause accidents. It's how drivers react to those conditions that cause accidents. Think about it. If the weather was to blame for the accidents, then every vehicle in the same weather would end up having the same accident. There'd be thousands of rear-end collisions at the same time. But if you know that it's snowing, raining, icy, or foggy, you react to it. You slow down. You pull further back. In fact, studies have examined thousands of accidents, and in every case, if the driver or drivers had been operating safely, every one of those accidents would have been prevented. Every single one.
Really? What about an earthquake? You know, like the road opens up right in front of you?
Okay, all right, I'll grant you. There are a few acts of God that can cause accidents. But come on, those are extremely rare.
I guess. So what you're saying is, if I drive in a way that avoids or reduces risk, I'll never cause an accident. It all falls on me.
Yes, and yes.
Let's stop now and discuss that conclusion that if you drive in a way that avoids or reduces risk, you'll never cause an accident. It's all up to you. Do you agree?
Again, one of the fundamental tenets to this entire training process is accountability. If we can get our driver trainees to understand that it all falls on them, we're going to have safer buses on the road, safer drivers, and ultimately our student passengers are going to be safer. It's not enough just to give education and present materials to potential drivers. We have to make it presented in a way that hits home with them, where it becomes almost personal. One of those ways is when we're talking about individual responsibility is giving them examples. So here's a common example. Everybody has a student that they care about. It may be their son, their daughter, their grandchild, their niece, nephew, their goddaughter, godson, cousin, right? We all have somebody that we care about. So frame it that way. You see a Facebook post this morning that the driver of bus 35 takes as much risk as legally possible with the safety of the students on their bus. And you find out that's the bus that child that you love rides. How confident would you be with them getting on the bus to ride home or putting them on the bus the next morning? Think about that for just a minute. Now, what do I mean by takes as much risk as legally possible? If the speed limit is 35 miles per hour, how fast, this is just an honest self-assessment, how fast are you driving in your car? One of the things as trainers, as educators, we have to understand human tendencies, human nature, what some societal norms are, and then train those out. Most people will say they take 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. So if it's 35, they do 40. There's a couple of reasons for that. Sometimes law enforcement, if they issue a citation for doing 5 miles or less over the limit, the driver gets an attorney, they can get it tossed out in court. So law enforcement rarely issues citations for that. So the societal norm is I can do 5 over. When we're transporting passengers, it's a completely different set of expectations. The risk we choose to take in our own vehicles cannot be the same level of risk we take when transporting students. It's important that we set that expectation when we're talking to trainees. So when they're driving the school bus, if the speed limit is 35 miles per hour and they are driving 35 miles per hour, they're taking as much risk as legally possible with the safety of their students. Now, we don't want them to go to the other extreme and do 5 miles per hour in a 35, where every car behind them wants to pass them and it creates a different hazard. So typically the best practice is 5 under the speed limit. That's just one example of how we can give specifics that can shake somebody out of their typical routine and thought process. Make it real for them. That will help them understand that personal accountability is important, and we can largely affect the safe operation, safe transportation of students just by being cognizant and thinking about what we're doing, not going on autopilot, staying present in the moment.
Now it's time to review again. Safety means being free from risk. Safety means avoiding unsafe behavior or acting in ways that reduces risk. For example, maintaining a safe following distance. Accidents are unplanned events that disrupt activity, involve or affect people, and are caused. Now, this is important. If we want to eliminate accidents, we first have to have a good understanding of exactly what they are. Now let's look at how safety, freedom from risk, relates to accidents. We said that accidents are unplanned events. However, the unsafe behaviors that lead to accidents are often deliberate, conscious behaviors. For example, following too closely is the leading cause of accidents. But this is a conscious decision made by the driver. This is acting in an unsafe manner. A professional would always stay back at least 4 seconds. The most common vehicular accidents involving school buses are rear-end collisions, backing accidents, intersection accidents, hitting parked cars, side swipes, and pedestrian accidents. Now, every one of these accidents is caused by certain unsafe behaviors of the driver. If a driver changes their unsafe behavior, he or she will be free of risk and the accident won't happen. Stop now and discuss specific behaviors that lead to each of these types of vehicular accidents.
Rear-end collisions, we'll go through this one. There is never an excuse for a school bus rear-ending another vehicle. I go back to the example I used earlier. When we start our training day, measure off 40 feet, put the bumper of your training bus 40 feet off the bumper of a bus in front of you, and say, this is the minimum distance you should ever be while traveling down a roadway from the vehicle in front of you. Then it will be extremely unlikely they're ever involved in a rear-end collision that they cause. Now, there are some examples where we cause a rear-end collision and we're rear-ended. If we're not properly using our turn signals, our 8 ways, we stop and go as school bus drivers. So we could actually have a rear-end collision where if we're not using our signaling devices properly, we cause. Intersection accidents. We talked about one way to identify drivers that are risk takers. There's nothing wrong with sitting in an intersection a little longer than usual, waiting for all traffic to clear and then go. We typically think of intersections as stoplight intersections, but we've all had those moments at 4-way stop sign intersections where you make eye contact with another driver. Is it your turn to go? Is it my turn to go? The general rule of thumb is we're always last. We're typically the biggest thing on the roads we travel. It takes us longer to clear an intersection than other vehicles. So we just wait. Don't signal the other driver to go, just wait. They'll eventually go. If we do that, we're far less likely to be involved in an intersection accident. Backing accidents, the only time we should ever back is if it's an approved turnaround in some rural locations, if we have a spotter. But typically the best practice is we do not back a bus. Hitting parked cars or stationary objects. All too often I hear when it comes to accident reporting that the car shouldn't have been parked there. The car was illegally parked. Any way you cut it, it is contrary to our entire training program of accountability. There is no reason where it's acceptable for a commercial driver to hit a parked car or a stationary object. As trainers, what I want you to teach is, if in doubt, don't. If you don't think you can make it, don't try it. Whether it's road construction, there's heavy equipment parked on each side of the road, a car illegally parked at the end by a stop sign, whatever it happens to be. If in doubt, don't. Stop. A lot of times if you'll honk your horn, somebody will come out, especially if they're doing work there, whether it's a road crew, a contractor crew that's redoing gas pipes, anything like that. They'll come out to see what's going on, and then you can indicate that you need to move the vehicle so you can get through. Worst case scenario, you call the dispatch, call your supervisor, somebody is sent to either spot you backing up to get out of the situation or to guide you through. What we don't want to have happen is, I think I can make it, so I'm just going to go. That's taking more risk with the well-being of students and a vehicle and all the other people's cars and all different types of things. And there's no reason for it. Side swipes and pedestrian accidents, that leads to similar to the one above. If you don't think you can make it, don't. A lot of our side swipes happen because a driver thinks they can make it. Pedestrian accidents typically happen at intersections. The illustration that is going to be used is making a left-hand turn when we do triple LC defensive driving. Make sure that we teach rocking and rolling in their seat. Make sure that they understand that there are blind spots on a bus. If their mirrors are properly adjusted, they can see just about everything within inches of the front bumper of the bus and on the sides of the bus. Sometimes they get overconfident. with the views that the school bus mirrors afford. Again, teach them, if in doubt, don't. Ask for help. Teach them there's nothing wrong with asking for help. If you're in a difficult situation, don't be the only one that knows you're taking additional risk. That's what we need to impart to our new drivers.
Remember, people cause accidents, but even more basic than that, the unsafe behaviors people engage in causes accidents. So it would seem then that we just have to get rid of the behaviors that lead to accidents, and all the accidents will go away, right? Right. But of course, it's not quite that easy. There are thousands of behaviors that can lead to accidents, and it would be impossible to learn them all. It's a lot easier if we can organize all accident-causing behaviors into 3 broad categories. First, accidents occur when people fail to pay attention. Second, accidents occur when people exceed their performance capabilities. And third, accidents occur when people engage in unsafe behaviors. Let's take them one at a time. Accidents occur when people don't pay attention. Have you ever tripped over something, banged into something or somebody, or whacked your head on an open kitchen cabinet? Or worse yet, have you ever had to slam your brakes on because you weren't paying attention to the traffic up ahead of you? It's not uncommon for us to fail to pay attention to what's going on around us. And failure to pay attention can lead to an accident. An accident might not happen the very first time you fail to pay attention. After all, you might get lucky. But repeated enough times, failure to pay attention will eventually lead to an accident. It's human nature to go on autopilot. We're mentally unable to pay attention to everything around us. So our brain conserves energy by paying attention to only what seems important at the time. The problem is, going on autopilot prevents us from noticing anything that might be changing around us. And that's when an accident can happen. Think about all the driving situations you find yourself in. What kind of accidents can take place as a result of failing to pay attention?
This is another opportunity for us to make it personal, something that drives home our point with our trainees. Ask them has there ever been a time where you've gotten in your vehicle and you're going to a common destination. It may be the grocery store, church, someplace you routinely go to that's greater than a couple of miles. Have you ever arrived at your destination and thought to yourself, wow, that trip was quick. I don't remember the drive. Maybe you had 15 different things on your mind. You have something important going on in your life, but you drove from home to your destination and never really thought about what you were doing. That's the key definition of autopilot. It's something routine where you're not actively engaged in critical thinking. A lot of times you get to your destination unscathed, but it's scary. You may have merged onto a highway, gone through multiple intersections, whether stop signs, signaling devices, lights, crossed railroad tracks, a whole bevy of hazards that you don't even remember going through. Now that's in your personal vehicle, where the only risk you're taking is with your well-being and your assets. Now, we need to reinforce to trainees that driving a bus route is even more dangerous because we have the same stops. We drive the same roads, same turns, same potholes. We do pickups at the same spots. We are creatures of routine. Every morning we start at the same time. We hit the first bus stop at the same time, right? Where it's easy to go on autopilot, but the risk is way too high. We need to stay engaged. And this is one way to drive that point home. Refer back to that student, that child that they love. They may not be transporting their children that are directly related or that they particularly care about like it's their own child before they start driving a school bus. But most of us that have done this for a long time, all the kids that ride our bus are our kids. We care deeply, even the ones that are knuckleheads at times. So think about what kind of accidents can take place as a result of going on autopilot. It's staggering when we don't think about going through our route. Think about your route. Think about all the hazards on your route. If maybe there's a time where you got through your entire route and you're unloading it to school and you're like, man, did I pick up Jason today? Did I stop at Jason's house? If that's ever happened to you, communicate that to your trainees. Use our experiences to really make it real for them. That way it's not just lip service that they're hearing. A lot of times, some of these trainings become just mantras that are said once while they're in training and then they never hear it again. What we need to do is reinforce these consistently all the time when they're doing initial driver training, at kickoff meetings, at safety meetings. That way they hear it over and over. Repetition is important.
Clearly, there are a number of accidents and injuries that can happen if you fail to pay attention just one single time. So what can you do about it? Well, one way to avoid these types of accidents is to slow down. Carefully observe everything around you and be aware of your tendency to go on autopilot. Don't let it happen. Defensive driving uses the 4 principles of triple LC. Look ahead, look around, leave room, and communicate. Continually looking around will help you pay attention. It's important to keep your eyes and head constantly moving while driving. Now that's to help you notice any changes as soon as they happen. Here are a few other techniques that might be helpful. Get a good night's rest. Don't overload yourself. Take the time to clear your mind before driving. Make sure that you're focused on what you're doing. Now let's look at the second reason people have accidents. Accidents can happen when we exceed our performance capabilities. Now, we all have physical and mental limitations. Even the brightest and most physically fit people are still human. Accidents happen when people push the limits of their abilities too far. Now, whether it's trying to lift more than strength permits, standing on a chair to reach a high shelf, following too closely, or trying to drive without a good night's sleep, exceeding your performance capabilities is a really bad idea. Now, most of us know our own limits, but even so, we ignore what we know to be true. For example, the minimum safe following distance while driving is 4 seconds. Now, this distance provides you with enough time to recognize the need to stop, react by applying the brake, and bring the vehicle to a safe stop. If you fail to maintain the minimum distance, you won't always be able to react in time to avoid an accident. In other words, failing to maintain the safe following distance is the same as exceeding your performance capabilities. If you fail to maintain the minimum safe following distance, you're taking a risk that you don't need to take. An accident might not happen every time you do this, but if done enough times, exceeding your performance capabilities will lead to an accident. Think about all the driving situations you find yourself in. What kinds of accidents can take place as a result of exceeding your performance capabilities?
We can refer back to some of the previous slides like this. Collisions with stationary objects, understanding if in doubt, don't, is a prime example of exceeding performance capabilities. Driving too fast for the conditions during inclement weather, snow, ice, fog, increase speed exponentially increases the negative outcomes and reduces the amount of time you have to react. Understanding and teaching it in a way that all trainees recognize what they're about to embark on can be extremely rewarding, but extremely risky if they continue with the behaviors that they've done in the past. Some may have great driving habits. Others, more than likely, have developed some riskier driving habits over the years. You may have folks that have been driving a car for 10 years, folks that have been commercial truck drivers for 40 years. So every trainee is going to be different, but we need to identify what level of risk they're comfortable taking and then change that expectation.
Did you identify the following causes of accidents? Not getting enough sleep to be alert, driving too fast for the conditions, like in rain or snow, driving too close to the vehicle ahead of you, trying to squeeze into a space that could be too small, backing without a spotter. Earlier, we said there are three major reasons why people have accidents and injuries. The first is accidents occur when people fail to pay attention. The second is accidents occur when people exceed their performance capabilities. And the third, which is probably the most common reason accidents occur, is when people routinely engage in unsafe behaviors until a pattern of unsafe behavior develops. Now, let's face it, humans are creatures of habit. Think about what you did this morning. I'll bet it was a lot like what you did yesterday morning and the morning before that, wasn't it? Well, you probably have quite a few routines that you follow every day. Routines are simply behavior patterns that you've become familiar with. We all have certain behavior patterns. We park in the same parking space every day, eat at the same table, and usually with the same people. Behavior patterns evolve over time because we get little rewards for behaving in certain ways. For example, if you speed up towards a stale green light, maybe you make it through the light and save a few minutes.
As school bus drivers, we do, as we've talked about, have routines. School bus routes are inherently routine. What we have to do is establish positive behavior patterns. We need to make sure that all of our trainees know they don't continue on route until every student has been seated. We've all seen where a driver, students get on the bus and they're automatically taking off, but maybe that student dropped a pen or a paper, or maybe it's a bus route with a heavy student count and it takes a little longer to find a seat that day. But the driver's internal clock says, you know what, every other day I've started going again at about this time. That's an example of a behavior pattern. Driver that opens the door, kids get off, closes the door, and takes off again without counting the kids away, without ensuring that they've matched a student that requires a parent, whether it's a kindergartner, pre-K, special needs, whatever it happens to be. They don't count them away, count them to their house, match them up with the parent. That's a negative behavior pattern. There are so many more unsafe and safe behavior patterns. Some of the safe behavior patterns, whenever that example again, if you've ever sub-driven on a route, the kids walk up 10 feet just outside of the crossing gate and stand there and stare at you, waiting on you to give them the thumbs up. That's a safe behavior pattern. You know their regular route driver is doing the right things, teaching the students how to be safe bus riders. Students go to school to learn. We're a part of that education process. Students were born with the knowledge of how to safely ride a school bus, how to safely load and unload. We have to teach them, and we have to consistently reinforce that. And then understand that we transport students, kids. They're not fully matured adults that can rationalize and think of negative outcomes for their actions in real time. And we have to teach them safe behavior patterns as well.
We develop behavior patterns at home and at work. In many ways, behavior patterns can be good, safe, and productive. For example, this school bus driver always keeps his head moving and is looking around to make sure that there's no hazards. Now, this is a good habit that promotes safety and prevents accidents. He's been doing it so long, it's become a behavior pattern. Unfortunately, not every behavior pattern is good. Sometimes we can develop unsafe behavior patterns. Now, these unsafe behavior patterns can lead to accidents. For example, a school bus driver might not consistently count the children as they exit the bus to ensure that they reach a safe place before he pulls away. This is a very unsafe behavior, and if repeated enough times, will eventually lead to a terrible accident. Another example is following distance. Every morning, our big city highways are clogged with rush hour commuters who tailgate one another while driving 50, 60, even 70 miles per hour. Now, this is a very good example of an unsafe behavior pattern. Of course, these people don't have an accident every morning, Yet, repeated often enough, they'll eventually smash into the rear end of the car in front of them. According to the safety theory of 329.1, it's only a matter of time, but more on that later. For now, let's accept that people develop patterns of unsafe behavior. But why would we do this? As we mentioned before, there are basically two reasons. The first is ignorance. In other words, sometimes people, they just don't realize that a certain behavior is unsafe. The second reason is they've decided, whether consciously or unconsciously, that they're prepared to accept the risks of this unsafe behavior. Now, the first reason, ignorance, can be corrected through education, training, and advice. But the second reason, a person's willingness to accept risk, is much more difficult to influence. For now, let's focus on the behaviors that lead to accidents. Earlier, we discussed rear-end collisions. These often occur because of a combination of accident-causing behaviors. For example, maybe the driver was distracted by something on the side of the road and wasn't paying attention to what was going on up ahead. Maybe a car suddenly stopped. The failure to pay attention may have led to a following distance accident. Or perhaps he exceeded his performance capabilities by following too closely and not allowing a safe distance in which he could react to unexpected events and stop in time. Rear-end collisions happen all the time because people develop unsafe behavior patterns. If a driver consistently follows too closely, it's only a matter of time before he or she has a rear-end collision. Please stay back and maintain at least a 4-second following distance. Be prepared for the unexpected. Let's stop now and discuss how failing to pay attention, exceeding performance capabilities, and engaging in unsafe behaviors can all lead to the most common types of vehicular accidents.
We've gone through this slide already with many of these. What I want to leave you with is ensure that we're teaching situations that make it personal for them. Sitting in a bus 40 feet off another bus, telling them if you're stopped at a stop sign or a stoplight, make sure you can see the tires of the car in front of you touching the pavement. If in doubt, don't. All these things will ensure that our new drivers aren't in these type of situations.
As a professional school bus driver, what can you do to change your future behaviors to eliminate or reduce the causes of these accidents? Knowing the behaviors that lead to accidents and injuries is a giant first step towards preventing them. Now that you've identified the most common school bus accidents and their related behaviors, you can begin avoiding those behaviors. Just doing that will reduce the frequency of accidents. But what about the second reason we mentioned, the one where people simply accept too much risk? Well, we all know there's no room for risky behavior when it comes to driving a school bus. But let's take a look at some examples. Every morning, this school bus driver takes off on his route without performing a pre-trip inspection. Perhaps he's running late, or perhaps he's just lazy. Or maybe he figures nothing ever goes wrong and he doesn't need to do a pre-trip. He knows better, but he's decided that this is not a particularly risky behavior. In other words, it's a risk he's willing to accept. Besides, he gets the reward of saving some time. Here's another example. A driver frequently backs up her bus, even though with a little forethought, she could avoid backing altogether. She's been to safety meetings on the subject and she knows better, but still, she doesn't get out and check behind her bus. And she never uses a spotter. Stop now and discuss these two behavior patterns. What can be done when a person is willing to accept too much risk?
As commercial drivers, we all understand the importance of a pre-trip. At the beginning of this module, they discussed many of the safety risk components have been engineered out of school buses. While that is true, it is only true if we conduct a thorough pre-trip. We all know light bulbs, even with LEDs, can go out, turn signals, 8 ways can malfunction, stop arms can malfunction, things like that. There is no excuse for failure to do a pre-trip, checking all the items that we all know is supposed to be checked on a pre-trip. If we set that expectation with new drivers and we're the example, we make sure that every day we go out to our bus and we do a pre-trip, our new drivers will do the same thing. They learn by watching. A lot of them learn by listening to the radio. The goal to what we're going to go through, and I'll give you a snapshot of the modules you're going to be doing as part of this certification course, is to give our new drivers much more visibility to knowledge, situational awareness, so they're more prepared to be proficient school bus drivers their first day behind the wheel with students. And a lot of that is except understanding what risk is, understanding the elements that lead to increased risk. Not conducting a thorough pre-trip leads to increased risk. We need to make sure that they all know that.
In some situations, a person can engage in unsafe behaviors for a very long time without actually having an accident. Now, maybe that's why we do it. We get away with it for so long that we think it's safe. You see, people behave in ways that get them rewards. Often an accident-causing behavior is assumed to be safe and at the same time gets the person a little reward. A very good example is tailgating. Now, have you ever had a very aggressive driver come right up behind you and start tailgating you? What did you do? Chances are pretty good that you moved over and they sped on by you. So what was their reward? Well, you got out of their way and they got to carry on as fast as they wanted to go. Well, no accident, just a little reward. And guess what? They'll do it again and again and again, and people will keep getting out of their way. But repeated often enough, this behavior will eventually lead to a rear-end collision. Here's another very common example of why people tailgate. If they leave too much room, other cars will constantly cut in front of them. It's not a safe behavior, but a lot of people do it every day. Since we know it's unsafe, why do we do it so much? Well, once again, it comes with a little reward. You stop cars from cutting in, and you feel like you'll get to your destination sooner. Unfortunately, when you do not leave enough following distance, eventually the vehicle ahead of you will stop suddenly, and you will rear-end them.
Okay, this is making sense. If I think about all my driving behaviors that involve risk, like backing, rushing, or following too closely, I can easily change my behaviors to avoid them. If I do that, I'll get into the habit of reducing the risk, and we'll all be safer, right?
Remember, repeated often enough, unsafe behaviors will always lead to an accident. It's just a matter of time. Now, this is the basic premise of our fourth safety directive, the scientific theory of 329.1. It goes like this. For every major accident, there were 29 minor accidents or events that took place based on an identical unsafe behavior. And for each and every one of those 29 minor accidents, there were 300 identical unsafe behavioral events that went unnoticed or uncorrected. The following example is based on a true story. Please, keep the 329.1 theory in mind as you watch this series of events unfold. Now, this is a very sad but true story in which a father continued to repeat an unsafe behavior. That is, backing his car out of the driveway without first looking behind him to make sure his path was clear. Eventually, this behavior led to a minor accident. He crushed his daughter's bike. But even though this should have served as a warning, he continued until eventually he ran over his daughter and she died. The 329.1 theory demonstrates how pointless it is to get all upset after an accident has happened, if we aren't equally upset about the unsafe behaviors that led to it. The truth is, we can't do much about an accident after it's happened, but we can do a lot to eliminate the behaviors that we know lead to accidents and injuries. And if we reduce those accident-related behaviors, then the accident frequency will also be reduced. Now, this is important. People sometimes engage in unsafe behavior patterns. We all do it to varying degrees. We all have our own level of risk that we're willing to accept. But unsafe behavior patterns will always lead to accidents. Be aware of your own behaviors, and please don't develop unsafe behavior patterns. As a professional school bus driver, it's your job to provide safe, reliable transportation to our nation's children. There's no room for unsafe behaviors of any kind. So remember, repeated often enough, unsafe behaviors will always lead to an accident. It's just a matter of time. Now let's go back to the 4 accidents that we discussed at the start of this program. A school bus is following a pickup truck 4 seconds back, and the driver is looking ahead. The driver of the pickup is on a cell phone, not paying attention when he realizes a tractor ahead is slowing down. He brakes hard. The school bus driver had already seen the tractor slowing down and had covered his brake. With the 4-second following distance, the school bus stops and does not hit the pickup. 2 people who could have been killed are still alive. In the second accident, the school bus is making a left-hand turn. The driver is rocking and rolling and sees a pedestrian crossing. The pedestrian had a walk signal. The school bus stops. The driver smiles and waves to the pedestrian. No one is killed. In the third accident, a 6-year-old boy was the last to exit the bus, clutching his artwork from that day. He drops it and it blows in front of the bus. The driver knows 4 children exited the bus, but she can only see 3. As she's preparing to secure the bus so she can get out and look, the child appears smiling and clutching his artwork. No one is killed, and the child goes on to be a leader in their community. A school bus driver is in a position where they cannot avoid backing. The driver asks a pedestrian who's walking his dog to spot for him, staying on the sidewalk. As the driver is about to back up, the spotter is waving him to stop. The driver gets out of the bus and sees that a car had moved right behind the bus. The driver waits until the car moves, uses the same spotter, and reverses safely. By understanding and applying all that is taught in this program, these drivers had no accidents. They operated safely. This is what we want you to do.
The 329:1 ratio is extremely important, but also it's extremely important to understand what our role is in the 329:1. As driver trainers, we don't want to get to the 29 or the 1. We want to intervene at the 300 mark, whether it is by training new drivers, whether it is by identifying areas of improvement for veteran drivers. Any risky behavior that we see, we communicate that with our management staff, and we develop a plan to coach out those unsafe behaviors that are part of that 300. If we can do that, we can stretch that 300 to 500 to 600. That 29 becomes larger, and then it takes longer and longer and longer to ever get to that 1. That is our ultimate goal, is to intervene at the 300 and extend that 300.
In this course, we discussed safety and what it means to be safe. We said that safety is defined as freedom from risk. Risk is the possibility of damage or injury. So, safety is being free from the possibility of injury or damage. If we eliminate or reduce the risk around us, then we're safer. Then we looked at what happens when we aren't safe. This is when accidents can happen. We said that if we wanted to eliminate accidents, we first had to know what they are. We said that an accident is an unplanned event which disrupts activity, involves or affects people, and that has a cause. Then we learned why people have accidents. We said that while there are thousands of reasons, all of them could be organized into just 3 main categories. People fail to pay attention, people exceed their performance capabilities, and people have accidents because they repeatedly perform unsafe behaviors. In other words, they develop unsafe behavior patterns. We spent quite a bit of time discussing that third reason because it's the foundation for the scientific theory of 329:1. Next, we discussed some of the more common types of school bus accidents that occur and the behaviors that cause them. Understanding what accidents are and why they happen is the first step toward preventing them. Learning more about the specific accidents and the related behaviors that cause them is the second step. So what do you think the third step might be? Stop now and discuss what you can do with this new knowledge. When you're at work or at home, think about what you're doing. Ask yourself, is this safe? What can go wrong? When you're driving, think back to the common accidents we identified and the behaviors related to each. Are you doing something that can lead to an accident? If you are, why? What's the reward? Is it worth the chance of having the accident? The final message we want you to remember from this program is that to be safe, you need to remove or reduce the risk from how you drive. To do this, you need to eliminate any unsafe behaviors. Stay back 4 seconds, eliminate backing, count the kids away, rock and roll when turning. Work on developing safe behavior patterns. Eliminate the 300 unsafe behaviors, and you'll never have to worry about the 29 minor accidents or the 1 tragic accident. Be the professional driver you should be, and don't take chances. In fact, we suggest you adopt a vision, mission, and values for you, the driver. Vision, do it right, the first time, every time. Mission, to remove or reduce risk. Values, no unsafe behaviors. If you focus on these 3 practices, you'll be the best that you can be. Commit yourself now to examining all of your driving behaviors and to changing the unsafe ones so that you can avoid or reduce risk wherever you can.
So just to review, accidents are unplanned, they disrupt activity, they involve or affect people, and are caused. The 3 main reasons that accidents occur: people fail to pay attention, they exceed their performance capability, or they engage in unsafe behavior. 329 means that 300 unsafe actions will result in the accident, and after an incident, and after 29 incidents, there will be 1 major catastrophe. The key principles: definition of safety is freedom from risk. Risk comes from unsafe behaviors. Remove the unsafe behavior and you're safer. The analogy they used are buses parked at a lot. Doesn't take a government study to find out they don't get involved in accidents. It's only when people get involved that accidents happen. This first module sets the foundation for our entire training program. It sets the expectations, personal accountability, but it starts with us being self-aware as trainers, as leaders for our location, understanding that we're all human, nobody's perfect, we all make mistakes. Whether we've been doing this for 2 years or 30 years, there's areas that we can improve on. There's additional tools we can put in our tool belt to become safer drivers. This module will be phase 1. You'll do it again as part of the driver certification course. This is the only module I'm going to have you do twice intentionally. The reason is the principles that they outlay, it's a lot of information. Repetition is key. The more you hear it, the more likely you're going to be able to repeat it to your trainees. You can watch these modules as many times as you would like. Once you complete one, it'll come out of your tasks, but at any time you can go back and go through extra training, view library, and you can select any of the modules to review again. Policy, our custom courses, school bus safety company driver courses, and then there's an OSHA course. So we're going to go back into the admin area. I'll give you a quick review of the modules to do in phase 1. These are, I don't want to get too far ahead, so I want you to focus on the individual modules that are going to be included in phase 1. First thing we have are CDL practice tests. What School Bus Safety Company has done is they've identified the majority of written courses that are required to get a permit, and they have outlined specific ways to pass each section. Sorry, I'm having some internet difficulties here. So for the permit section, everybody that's watching this video has had a CDL for at least 2 years. To be a theory trainer, you don't have to currently hold the CDL, but you have to have held the CDL equal to the license class you're going to be training with all applicable endorsements for 2 years. And then for range and road, you have to currently hold a CDL equal to what you're going to be training with all applicable endorsements. But we need to be able to teach these. And for some of our folks that are going to be training, it may have been a decade since they've even seen the written test. One of the difficulties with identifying new school bus drivers is the time it takes for them to earn a paycheck. Sometimes with the mandated 14-day waiting period from the time they get permitted, it's not unrealistic where somebody is in the process for 4, 5, 6 weeks before they ever get paid. One way we can shorten that and reduce the amount of training pipeline losses that we have, that's folks that don't get their CDL and end up driving a school bus with students. From the date of application until the date they transport students, we consider that the training pipeline, is by helping them get their permit. We've done this, we tried to do this in many different ways, permit classes, things like that. What School Bus Safety Company has done, similar to the safety best practice video we've just watched, they've broken it down into individual sections that really make it digestible for a trainee to pass all the written tests, including air brakes and general knowledge, which are the 2 hardest. Some states have 5 written tests, some states have 4, but this will give them the basic information they need to pass those tests. As we know, they're standardized government tests, so we don't want to hand trainees a CDL guide anymore. What it ends up happening is we hand them a CDL guide, say, come see me when you have your permit. Some of them, it's overwhelming. They never come back. Sometimes it may be 2 or 3 weeks. They spend a week studying the CDL guide, getting lost in sections, studying items they never needed to study in the first place. So we're going to take control of the entire process. So part of phase 1 is every trainer getting knowledgeable about what it takes to pass the written test to get a permit. So we're going to go through these. You'll watch each of these videos, take these practice tests, so you'll know what each trainee is doing. What I'd like to see is every trainer is capable of teaching any section of the driver certification, whether it's permit, classroom, behind the wheel range, or behind the wheel road. Depending on, as I said before, how vast your location is, you may be specialized and primarily do classroom training. But I'd like for all trainers, regardless of size of location, to be knowledgeable about what other trainers are doing so that we can reinforce key elements in this. We can talk about safety best practices. We can talk about risk. What is safety? We can reinforce the 4-second following distance. And the classroom trainer can say, whenever you get out to behind the wheel, they're going to show you exactly what 4 seconds looks like every day. So there's going to be no doubt what the minimum following distance is at in-town speeds. So we'll do the permit training. We'll do bullying prevention on the school bus. Many drivers, even veteran drivers, say, well, there's nothing I can do about bullying. I'm driving the school bus, I'm focused on external factors. There are a lot of things that we can do while focusing on external factors and driving by being in the moment, dialed in, listening to our students, scanning our mirrors, where we can prevent bullying and make sure our kids are safe on the bus. Then we'll have each of the modules for the driver training course. Only locations that have Zonar, as part of their pre-trip will have to do this course, number 4. Now, looking at this, it seems daunting. These are all required elements for the MAP 21, ELDT, however you've heard it, but it's basically the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's mandate for entry-level driver training. The other one is OSHA compliance for school bus drivers. That falls in with the ELDT mandate. And then we'll have some items to help you as a trainer develop some training techniques. So learning basics, coaching the adult learner, the training process, how to train new drivers, and then it's mandated that we have assessments built into this. FMCSA requires a test and requires 80% to pass the test. So the MAP 21 final assessment, the trainer final assessment, these are all part of phase 1 of becoming a certified driver trainer for Apple Bus Company. Just to give you an example, the expectation is that you complete phase 1. Now, depending on your schedules, the timeline can be as loose or as structured as we need it to be. If you have a route that is 25 hours a week and you don't do regular trips or any additional duties, that would leave you 15 hours a week to do modules. We need to be smart about it, work with your management team. The only time you should go into overtime while doing this driver trainer certification course is with your manager's approval. All time spent on modules will be paid. I'll just show you an example. And we'll use me. My name is Sean. So we go into coursework history. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. We go into coursework history, click on any one of these, and it says when we logged in, how much time we spent on each to pass them. I spent a lot of time logging into these to review them, to set the courses up. So typically you'll have maybe 1 or 2 times where you logged in. However, your location does timesheets. Make sure that you talk with your manager on how to turn in your time for training hours to do this certification. So phase 1, go through. You'll have all the assignments assigned to you for the trainer certification course. That is permit, bullying, driver training, and then the trainer education, how to teach the adult learner those modules. There's a lot of modules. It's going to be a lot of new information. I want to reiterate again, please keep a tablet of paper, a notebook next to you. Write down notes for each section. If it's things that are new, that you've never heard before, make notes. If you have questions, make notes. Identify areas. If you think of ways as you're going through modules that you can teach this based on your geography, your location specifics, any key items that may be different from the modules that are standardized as to what your location does, make sure you make notes of those, because when you have trainees, you need to tell them, the module says this, but here at our location, due to state requirements, district requirements, whatever it happens to be, this is how we do it, which may vary slightly from what School Bus Safety Company modules presents. I'd like to thank you for this time spent. I want to congratulate you. Being a driver trainer is an awesome responsibility. It means that your manager trusts you, that you do a lot of things really well, and they trust you to teach new drivers how to safely transport students. This is an opportunity for you to ensure the safety of potentially thousands of students and raise standards. I'd encourage you not to bring your own personal pet peeves, any biases. whenever you come into training. We need to teach the material. How we teach that will be dependent on individual style. The delivery may be different that I do than you do, but we need to be teaching the same things. The way the entry-level driver training requirement works is Applebus has to certify our process to FMCSA, that our process meets all the elements that they've mandated. So if any trainer at a location decides not to teach a certain element and they get audited, we could have our training provider registry number yanked, and we would no longer be able to train entry-level driver trainers. So it's important that while we have the opportunity to be specific in some areas, what is presented in these modules is the minimum. You can add on location specifics, but we have to teach this, and we'll go through the curriculum, syllabus, some different items a little later on in phase 2. So once you complete all these modules for phase 1, talk with your manager, then it'll be time for phase 2. Phase 2 will be a quick review of these modules, and then we'll get into the behind the wheel and how we train behind the wheel and pre-trip. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking on this incredible responsibility of becoming a certified driver trainer. It's a position of respect. It's also one where you are right, wrong, or indifferent, saying, look at me. So be cognizant of that. Make sure we're doing the right thing when we're behind the wheel. We're reducing risk. We're transporting our students on our bus routes in a way that aligns with what we're going to be training new drivers. So take this time as you're learning and you're going through all these modules to identify unsafe behaviors that we may be doing, because we are human. As they said in the video, we all make mistakes. But if we work every day to improve, we're ultimately going to have safer passengers, safer kids, safer students. So again, thank you. Have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, please reach out to your manager.